Aliens mocked the human's size, then learned his pet was the galaxy's apex predator. The doors of the trade station hissed open, and 40 pairs of eyes turned toward me at once, and I already knew what they were thinking before a single word was spoken. I stepped through the threshold with my chest tight and my palms damp, because I was the only human in a hall built for giants. The Voctori stood 3 meters tall, their shelled bodies catching the light like polished stone, and their mandibles clicked together in a rhythm that sounded almost like laughter. Beside them, the Sonari coiled in loops thick enough to crush a transport pod, their long bodies rising and falling with slow, patient breaths. I felt smaller with every step I took across that polished floor. "This is the human delegate?" one of the Voctori said, leaning down so close that I could feel the air move from his breath. "It is so small, fragile. How does such a creature even survive long enough to reach the stars?" The room answered with a wave of sound, hisses and clicks and low buzzing, and I understood without translation that they were laughing at me. I did not answer right away. I had learned, over the past year of training for this exact moment, that silence could be its own kind of strength. Instead, I reached toward the small comm unit on my wrist and gave it a single tap. Behind me, the cargo doors of my transport slid open with a deep mechanical groan, and every eye in that hall turned again, this time toward the sound. A shape stepped out of the shadows of the cargo bay, moving with slow and deliberate grace, each paw landing without a sound on the metal floor. He stood taller than my shoulder, his coat dark and thick, his eyes catching the light in a way that made even the Sonari elder go still. His name was Ranger, though nothing about him looked ordinary anymore. "This," I said, my voice steady now, "is Ranger. He is my companion." The Voctori leader straightened, his mandibles slowing their clicking. "A pet," he said, testing the word like it tasted strange. "You bring a pet to a diplomatic summit?" "Where I come from," I said, "a companion says more about a person than words ever could." Ranger walked forward and sat beside me without command, calm, patient, watching the room the way a lighthouse watches the sea, steady and unbothered by the storm around it. Nobody laughed this time. I had grown up with dogs my whole life, but Ranger was different from the moment my daughter Emma brought him home as a small, clumsy pup with oversized paws and a habit of tripping over his own tail. Back then, none of us knew what he would become. A special program had been testing a new breed, engineered from generations of working animals, built for strength, endurance, and calm intelligence, meant for search and rescue work on distant colonies. Ranger was one of the last of that line, and somewhere along the way, in the years since Emma first hugged him goodnight, he had grown into something the record books had never quite seen before. The first cycle of the summit passed with careful words and careful smiles, but I could feel the room studying Ranger more than they studied me. During a break between sessions, a young Voctori attendant named Kessa approached, his curiosity clearly stronger than his caution. "Does it bite?" he asked, circling Ranger at a careful distance. "He listens," I said. "That is different from biting." Kessa laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. "A creature that listens instead of fighting. No wonder your species stayed so small. You did not need to grow strong, because you never had to defend yourselves." I wanted to correct him, but I let it go, because some lessons are better learned than told. That evening, during a formal reception, a diplomat from a species I had never met before decided to test the limits of the calm creature sitting quietly beside my chair. He was tall, pale blue in color, with long fingers that ended in small hooks, and he leaned toward Ranger with a mocking grin stretched across his narrow face. "Let us see this brave defender of humans," he said, and before anyone could stop him, he snapped his fingers loudly, inches from Ranger's face, clearly expecting a flinch, a bark, some small proof of weakness. Ranger did not move. He simply turned his head, slow and deliberate, and looked directly into the diplomat's eyes. It was not a growl. It was not a warning. It was simply a look, calm and unblinking, The kind of look that made the diplomat's confident grin fade into something quieter, something closer to doubt. The hall went silent again, and this time it stayed that way for a long moment. Word of the encounter spread quickly through the station, faster than any official report could travel. By morning, the science division had requested permission to run a full scan of Ranger, curious about the strange calm he carried, the kind of stillness that unsettled even seasoned diplomats from species far larger and far older than mine. I agreed, mostly because I trusted what they would find. The results came back within a few hours, and the head researcher, a quiet Essenari elder named Doran, requested a private meeting with me. He met me in a small side room, his long body coiled neatly on a raised platform, his expression unreadable in the way most alien expressions were to me. "Your companion," Doran said slowly, "is unlike anything in our records." "He is just a dog," I said, though even as I said it, I knew the words no longer fit. "His reflexes," Doran continued, "are faster than anything we have measured outside of predator species from the outer systems. His strength, his awareness, his patience under provocation, these are not the traits of a simple companion animal. These are the traits of something built to survive in places where survival is never guaranteed." I thought of Emma's small hands wrapped around Ranger's neck when he was still a pup, of quiet evenings on our porch, when he would rest his head against my knee and sigh, content with nothing more than being near his family. I thought of how easily we had called him gentle, how easily we had called him ours, without ever fully understanding what quiet strength could look like from the outside. "He was bred to protect," I said finally, "not to attack. There is a difference, even if your records do not have a word for it." Doran studied me for a long moment, his tongue flickering once. "Perhaps," he said, "your species does not need to grow tall to be dangerous. Perhaps you have simply learned to keep your strength calm, until the moment it is needed." The final day of the summit arrived with a tension I had not expected. A dispute broke out between two larger delegations over territory rights near a shared trade route, voices rising, tempers flaring, in ways that made even the station's automated systems flash warning lights along the walls. In the middle of the argument, one delegate, larger and louder than the rest, moved suddenly toward another, his long arms raised in a gesture meant to intimidate rather than harm, but sudden enough to startle everyone nearby. Ranger moved before I could react, sliding smoothly between the two delegates, not with aggression, but with a calm, immovable presence that made both parties pause. He did not bark, he did not threaten. He simply stood there, steady and grounded, until the tension in the room began to ease on its own, as though his stillness had reminded everyone what calm actually looked like. The larger delegate stepped back first, clearly shaken by how quickly his own anger had cooled in the presence of something so quiet and so sure of itself. "Your creature," he said, looking at me with something between respect and unease, "did not attack. He simply stopped us." "That is what he was built for," I said, "to stand between danger and the people he cares for, without needing to prove anything beyond that." By the time the summit ended, the mocking laughter from the first day had faded into something else entirely, something closer to quiet respect. Delegates who once looked down on my height now looked at Ranger with a kind of careful admiration, understanding, perhaps for the first time, that strength did not always announce itself with size or noise. As I packed to leave the station, Kessa approached one final time, his earlier mockery replaced with something more thoughtful. "I misjudged your kind," he said. "I thought smallness meant weakness." "Most people do," I said, "until they meet something that proves otherwise." Kessa glanced at Ranger, who sat calmly by my side, watching the busy station with the same patient stillness he always carried. "He is remarkable." "He is loyal," I said. "The rest simply follows from that." As the shuttle doors closed behind us and the station shrank into the darkness of space, I rested my hand on Ranger's head, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing beneath my palm. He had not raised his voice once during the entire summit. He had not needed to. His strength lived in his patience, in his calm, in the simple, unshakable loyalty that asked for nothing in return. Back home, Emma would hug him the same way she always did, unaware that the galaxy had just learned something my family had known for years, that the quietest strength is often the one nobody expects, until the moment it truly matters.